afternoon, everyone. It's a lovely Friday, and I understand some of our friends might be having prayers right now. We probably would want to start this show at 2 o'clock going forward. My name is Hetal, and I am the CEO of OPsych. I'm an organizational psychologist, and we started to decide that it would be great to bring on lots of speakers to talk about all things related to psychology. And today we're having a really, really interesting topic. And that is the voice of the youth and what we want of our leaders of tomorrow. And the reason for this is because for the first time in our nation's history, or Malaysia's history, some 1.4 million new voters between the ages of 18 and 20 will be allowed to vote. This, combined with 42% of registered voters between the ages 21 to 39, brings the total number of young voters to some 48% of the electorate. So giving this, obviously, the youth a big say in the outcome of elections. The real question of today would be, are the voice of the youth important? Will it lead to better or more successful outcomes in who we choose as our leaders? How did this change actually happen, where we've started to have more voters coming in between the age of 18 and 20? And what is the impact as we potentially change the scene of leaders going forward? With me today, three lovely, amazing speakers. We have Dr. Bridget Welsh, who is an educator, scholar, and a political analyst. Also one of our favorites on BFM, who just speaks so much with regards to Southeast Asian politics. A pleasure to have you here, Dr. Bridget.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Maybe a quick introduction about yourself as well from you, if that's okay.
I grew up in Malaysia and I work on politics in the region. And I have been going to the ground during elections. And I've written extensively on youth. And I hope that I am very convinced that the young people will make a big difference in this election.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we also have Aislinn Noel. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that how I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Aislinn, but very close. Thank you.
Very good. Aislinn, you get one chance at pronouncing my name wrongly as well, okay? Aislinn is the communications officer of Undi 18, and Undi 18 is the organization that has had a huge part to play in increasing or having more of the 18 to 20-year-olds on board. Prior to this, we only had 21 years and above to vote. And because of the great work done via Undi and through the entire community, we now have 18-year-olds and above who can vote for us. Aislinn is a young graphic designer, so I'm sure there's lots to talk about with regards to the youth, and obviously very passionate about highlighting social justice through the work that you do. Quick introduction from yourself as well, if that's okay.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I work with Undi 18, which is, as Hetal introduced, did I get your name right?
Yes, okay. You have one free pass, but yeah, very close. Hetal.
It's Hetal. Okay. So yes, as she introduced, Undi 18 worked to lower the voting age to 18 so that more young voters can take part in the democratic process in Malaysia. So very excited to be here and talk about youth and the voice of leaders of tomorrow. Thank you.
Wonderful. We also have Ng Peng Han, who is a former Perdana Fellow to the Ministry of Health. He's also the co-founder of Project Langit. So excited to have you here because I've seen that you're obviously very close to the top leaders in the Ministry of Health as well. And you're super excited about becoming a future leader yourself and maybe one day Prime Minister as well.
Yeah, right. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Hetal, and nice to meet the fellow panelists. So yeah, as Hetal has mentioned, I once co-founded the social enterprise called Project Langit, where we empower like B40 stay-at-home mothers, where we help them to digitally market their big products. And also recently, I just entered my tenure as a Perdana Fellow to the Ministry of Health, and the current minister is YB Kari Jamaluddin, who was formerly the Minister of Youth and Sports as well. So I learned a lot from him and hope to kind of share some experience and how it relates to today's topic for discussion as well later in the session today.
Wonderful. Very excited to speak all three of you. I'm sure it'll be a great learning experience. So maybe we can start off by what does it mean for all of you now that we have decreased the age of voters from 21 to 18? How did you feel in one word when that happened? And what does that, what kind of sentiments do you have around that? Maybe we can start with Dr. Bridget.
I think it's a wonderful addition to increase the voter age. The one word I felt was fantastic. Malaysia is going through a political transition, and when you empower young people, it actually helps to create a more inclusion, and I think is a more healthy system for voices in Malaysians.
Wonderful. Definitely have a lot of follow-up questions around that as well. Aislinn, what about you? Your organization had a huge part to play in this. Tell us a little bit about that and how did you feel when this got approved?
So I actually personally joined UND18 after the bill had already been passed, but it was a huge reason why I wanted to join because I think it was so great. In one word, I would say very proud because we were able to bring something to fruition that would effectively change the course of the country by allowing young people's voices to be heard in such a important way. Personally, as a first-time voter, I suppose I would also say that I'm very proud to be able to exercise my right to vote this time. Yeah.
Wonderful. And would you tell us a little bit about how you think or how you understand UND18 was able to create this change?
So mostly we were able to create this change by really lobbying for it, with the help of, especially with like YB, Syed Sadiq, and the other members of parliament who brought it up and who voiced their support for it. But I think a lot of it was also into educating the public and why it's such an important thing and why we should want it to be implemented, and that trickled upwards to the people in authority who were then able to pass the bill. Yeah.
Fantastic. It brings so much of hope for people who, tend to experience some helplessness after potentially trying effort, with full effort to create change. And a lot of times they might ask, is there a point in trying anymore? And lobbying obviously is a huge part to play. And there's a lot of effort involved in that as well. Peng Han, what about you? How did this make you feel?
Okay. Personally, I think I'm super excited for this upcoming election because just like Aislinn also, like this will be my first time actually being able to vote. I'm 22 years old this year, so it's my first experience. And also, I've heard like from other countries, like the demographic that actually go out to vote usually are like maybe like the older demographic. So for Malaysia, this is the first for all of us. So I'm actually very much excited and looking forward to how the voter demographic will play out. Now, right now, I'm also like a full-time university student. So, and I do know that many of my peers, my friends, they do have plans to go back and vote. And also the university is also like, they're working very closely and very cooperatively with the students to kind of like get them back to vote at the voting date, which is on 19 November for Malaysia. And as of right now, also like we're already like organizing bus services and other transportation services for students so that they can go back to their hometowns to cast their vote. So very excited for this upcoming election. Yeah.
Excellent. So my question now would be: are younger voters better voters? Are they just, hoping for things that might not be the right thing? And what is the difference now that we would have younger voters? What will this do for us? Will it make things better? Will it make things worse? Will it make things more confusing? Over to you, Dr. Bridget.
I think the word better is a bit loaded, but I would say that, if we look at the results of the previous elections, Malaysia is a very young demographic. So younger voters really affect the outcome in very close races. We have about a third of the seats in this current election that are extremely close. We saw in Johor that 59% of younger voters, of the first-time voters, voted, which is that word that we heard just now from about excitement, right? In that context of wanting they will participate in high numbers. So they will make an impact. Their vote will count. But I think the challenge has been that there has not been adequate voter education for younger voters. Many of them have questions about what are the issues. And I think this is really a quick learning period time for younger people to sort of engage the issues. And I think the question also is, what are their priorities? And right now, the political parties have yet to kind of clearly articulate what are they going to do for young people. They expect them to win, to support them, but they don't necessarily have a clear plans for that. And I think what we're going to see in the campaign is how this begins to evolve. Unfortunately, the way that young people are being addressed is higher. in that context. And I think that this is going to be a challenge to be able to see whether or not youth voices are going to be heard more effectively, and the campaigns are going to actually have more concrete deliverables that are not just promises, but actually sort of concrete plans. Because this is the big shift that's happened in Malaysia. It's not just about the young people coming in. They have young people, young generation has a different outlook about politics. They think about things differently, and there's also a sense of there's greater expectations. And of course, as with all young people, there's also a degree of idealism, which I think is refreshing. It opens up a kind of hopefulness. But youth voters are as divided as the rest of the country. The question is which of those ones are going to vote, and what are those particular messages that are going to come through more effectively.
Wonderful. Can you tell us, Dr. Bridget, what do you think are their priorities? How does it differ from the older ones? And also, I really love what you said that they themselves might be very divisive. Can you just double click on that a little bit, if possible?
So let me just quickly, I want to make sure the younger voices have enough time to speak also, but let me just be very quick here and say two things here. Number one is that we do see in polling that there are progressive and conservative younger voters. And this is, of course, a reflection of what we see of the electorate as a whole. And so if we're in Terengganu, what we see, for example, is the youth disproportionately support PAS. If we're in Selangor, we see the Pakatan Harapan gains more of the youth support. So it also depends on the local context. But what is interesting about younger voters generally is that while they may have political leanings that are different, their political allegiances are less strong. This is a time that they're being socialized into the political process, and they're making their sets of decisions. What makes this election uncertain is that we have a high level of numbers of voters who have yet to decide. They're watching things very carefully. What do young people care about? They care about jobs, education. They care about lots of bread and butter issues, but they also care about having inclusion in the process. And we can see that in the way that we can look at the kind of surveys about what young voters have articulated. The issues of social mobility is a real challenge for younger people. Many of them are more vulnerable, and I think that they're looking to see what sort of future the country has. And this is what is going to be interesting in this election. Really sort of show that they are moving towards a different direction as opposed to currently.
Wonderful, interesting. And Eslyn, what about you personally? What are you hoping to see in the future of our leaders in the government per se? What is the difference that you want to be seeing?
I want to,
yeah.
Please.
No. Go ahead if you wanted to add something.
That's all. I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think with young people, representation is very important. We really, you've seen it in the media that we consume, the way that we love to see characters on TV and stuff that look like us and talk like us. And I think the same goes for people who are representing us. It's equally as important, if not more important, because they speak for us, right? They discuss policies, they make our laws, they decide what goes, what is put into place for the betterment of the nation. And so they should really be people who represent us. They should be diverse in age, they should be of different genders, and so that they represent as many people as possible. So I think the young people really want to see a change in the nation's mindset, in the sense that we want leaders who really have our best interests at heart and who represent us thoroughly.
And do you feel that's happening right now?
I think that with the increase in awareness as voter education campaigns continue to grow, and as people become more and more aware of their right to vote and what it means to take part in the democracy, I think people are starting to see that the people in power don't necessarily represent them. As people learn to read manifestos and to more critically analyze what's going on in the government, they may come to the conclusion that, hey, this doesn't actually match up with the ideals, or this doesn't actually work to my benefit, and I think that needs to change. So I think there is a shift that's going on at the moment, which is going back to what Dr. Bridget said. It's really divided at the moment, and it'll be a really interesting election for us to see where people's priorities are.
Absolutely. And Peng Han, you being very close to the ground, what are your thoughts on youth and how they view leaders? And in your personal experience, what matters and what are things that you struggle and you're not happy about still?
Okay, so I mean, definitely for this upcoming election, I think our political leaders really have to like kind of like talk to the youths and kind of get what's our perspectives and what we want from the country. Because right now, I would say like we are quite a major stakeholder in this upcoming election already. And yeah, just like what Dr. Bridget said, worker education has a lot of room for improvement. I do feel, even personally myself also, I feel like I have a lot more to learn regarding the democratic system in Malaysia and all of the various legislative branches, etc. And but I feel like as the campaign progresses, because right now 5th November is when they will announce the candidates. So right now is I think 28th October or so. So we still have some time before I can actually feel that the manifestos that they're pushing out, what is the vision for each of the party. Right now is kind of like preliminary, and I even around my peers also like there's not much like hype and conversation about it. Right now, really the conversation is like it's like getting back to vote, getting back to the hometown so that they can cast their vote. So right now that's what the conversation is focused on about. But I believe that as the day goes on, and then as the weeks go by, and then the parties will start releasing like their vision, their what they want for Malaysia and their political message. Then I think by then I hope that my peers as well, they would all kind of like have a conversation around that and try to decide who is the best. I also particularly like a point made by Dr. Bridget, which is that the youth of today don't have such strong allegiances to established political parties in Malaysia. So I think that's great, and that a lot of my friends who are politically active, I know, active not politically active but active in civic engagement, meaning they join like Program Perdana Fellow, Parliament Belia Malaysia, and all that. Yeah, they correct. A lot of them are just neutral. Most of them are neutral, but when they want to choose their leaders, it's going to be based on their merits, the vision that they have, as well as the manifestos that they will be proposing. So I think that's something that is great for Malaysia, because it shows that we care about the nation, the outcome of the election, and not just like the color of the party, the color of the flag. So I think moving forward, that is something that is good to have for Malaysia as a whole.
Right, fantastic. So the typical notion about the youth would be romanticism. There's a lot of romantic ideas, ideals that we want for ourselves in the future. As we grow older, maybe we become a bit more practical. Potentially, from the data that we've looked at, this is the true understanding of ideologies. There's a lot more romanticism. There's a lot more hope. Whereas as you grow older, there's a lot more practical wisdom that potentially comes in. It's not true for everybody. I wanted to know, with regards to the youth coming on board, the idea here is still not whether or not the youth are on board, but who would be the real best leaders for the country. How are we actually measuring it? How are we measuring success of great leaders? And when the youth actually vote, are they voting based on what's happening that is sexy and appealing on social media? Or are we actually doing it from a very data-driven and a research-based point of view? So the real question over here is, it's great that we have more voters, it's great that we have younger voters, but does this mean that we're actually making more evidence-based decisions that eventually lead to positive outcomes for the nation from a sustainability perspective as well? Because if we keep changing our minds and we are not happy with this current one, we change the next one, there's obviously a huge impact whenever that comes to change. So what are your thoughts about emotionality versus facts, and how do we place the youth in that continuum of sorts? Maybe just to switch it up a little bit, Peng Han, maybe you can start first.
Sorry, can you please clarify again? Like, what do you mean, like emotionally and facts? When it comes to, you're talking about the voting outcome, is it? An outcome of the election, is it?
Yeah. So how do you think the youth are making decisions? Is it based on what they see on social media and therefore the emotionality from it? Or is there actual real facts about who they're voting, why they're voting for it? And how do we know that eventually, because we have a lot more youth, that the outcome leads to something that is factually and evidence-based going to make everything much better? We saw that in 2 elections ago. Everybody was voting based out of what they really, really wanted. But eventually, even though it's what they really wanted, the backing wasn't strong enough as well. There was a lot of complaints that started coming out. Even though they voted for the government that they wanted, but when the new government came in, they were still unhappy about it. And there were still complaints. So, Peng Han.
Yeah, so it really, it remains to be seen. That's why I'm saying like this election is really exciting. I think last time my perspective is the young voters, they voted based on kind of like not so much. In a way, it's emotion and it's also a bit of facts. Of course, the main political messaging for the 2018 election was, I think, to eradicate bribery and corruption in the government. So I think I've seen a few posters from the opposition as well, and currently it does seem like on social media, and currently it does seem that their political messaging is kind of the same, which is about eradicating corruption. And but yeah, definitely for this upcoming election, I think uh, the social media game for each of the political parties has got to be strong if you want to win over the youth voters, as well as to put forward your political messaging in a clear and transparent way so that it reaches hundreds and thousands of eligible voters. I think your social media game has to be really good. As for emotions or facts, wow, it's gonna be hard to say. I've seen there's one documentary I think about Cambridge Analytica. I think where they played on the emotion states of the voters, and it became quite. They use social media to kind of like manipulate the perception of the voters. So I'm not sure how intense the social media game is going to be for this upcoming election, and how the Malaysian election parties will do in the social media game. As of right now, based on my observation, I do see that the ones that are really, really active, I think Barisan Nasional is active, UMNO, Siswa, and all that. I do follow a few political parties, and but this is based on my observation. But really, can't really say for now. I think it remains to be seen, like how would they vote? How would they vote based on emotions or facts? Yeah, that's it from me.
Right. Yeah. That's so. What about you, Eslin? Where's the decision making when you look at your peers, or even how only 18 looks at it? Is it all very factual, or is there a huge emotional part to play? How are decisions being made for you guys?
I think I just like to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, which is that youths tend to be more romantic in their ideals. I think I would like to contradict that a little bit, actually, because I think that a lot of young people, a lot of us have grown up in an era of constant change and instability, especially politically. And I think it's made us a lot more wary of our leaders. Instead of romanticizing things, I think we look at things with a critical eye now, perhaps even more so than our parents or our grandparents did. And this makes our votes more valuable because we are essentially holding each candidate and each party to a standard that is relevant to what we've seen as a generation, to how they've handled things. So moving from
Fair
that
enough.
to from moving from that to how we vote, whether it's based on an emotional decision or a factual one, I think. Um, Sorry, give me a second. I think that Gen Z and millennials, which is the voter group that we're talking about, I think we're often looked down on for being snowflakes. Is the term that a lot of people use, where we let our emotions make our decisions for us, and we need trigger warnings and these kind of things. But I think the truth is that we just have a lot of empathy for the environment and for those around us, and I think that is a large factor in deciding where our votes will go, because when you have a group of people who are well informed, when you have a group of people who are tech savvy, who are on social media all the time, checking information left and right, and this group of people care about the people around them, and they care about the decisions that are being made. You, as a political party, have to put forward a really good case for the youth. You have to put forward an agenda that the youth can look at and say, okay, we subscribe to this because you're being looked at with critical eye, you're being fact checked. And I don't think political parties can rely on the spread of just political propaganda anymore, because the youth are so much more aware. And it's true, we do have a lot more to go in terms of voter education. Some people don't even know how to mark their ballot. Some people are not even sure. We at MD18, we get these questions all the time on TikTok, on Instagram. People are like, I'm not sure who to vote for. All the parties kind of suck. And that's a sentiment that I think a lot of the youth have as well, where we don't have strong political allegiances, but the opposite of that is that we don't have political allegiances at all. And so people are kind of just lost. And this is where I think groups like MD18, we're doing our best to educate people on how to choose your candidate, how to evaluate what kind of person you would like representing you, and to look at the policies that these parties are putting forward and to see whether it really benefits you. So coming back to the question, I think this generation has a pretty good grasp of being somewhere in the middle when it comes to voting out of emotions and facts, because we have both of it going for us. Yeah.
I totally agree. Really, really love your challenge on that particular statement on romanticism versus practical knowledge, because really, as a psychologist, the moment you start to put a label or judgment in, you're already false, because you cannot categorically put 21 million people into a category and label them all as such as well. I also really love what you've spoken about with regards to having a critical eye based on all of the experience. And I think more than ever, obviously, there's a bombard of information that was probably hidden for a very long period of time, thanks to, well, that's the one good thing about social media, isn't it? Like, you've got a lot more access of that information, and you get to see all of the comments. There's lots of brainstorming that is happening from everybody, having a say in it. And yeah, it is becoming a much more critical way of looking at things. And I think emotionality and being factual are also wrong ways of looking at it. You can't get emotional about things that you are factually disagreeing on. So yeah, totally agree with what you're saying. And Dr. Bridget, over to you. What about you?
I'm going to slightly disagree and say that I still think emotions matter a lot in Malaysian elections.
Of course.
I think, and the question is what emotions, right? Traditionally what people have, it's been a political polarized electorate. They've tried to mobilize anger. And then so we saw in 2018, we saw this kind of combination of anger and hope, right? And the country has been through such significant turmoil in the last few years through the COVID pandemic. There's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of displacement. There's a lot of cynicism. There's a lot of wariness and distrust in that process. I think there's a real gap between what the parties are doing and what the people's want from their leaders in that context. So I do think emotions will still be important. I think for young people, you have to have a positive narrative. You have to be future and present oriented. You can't just be past oriented. Because most of the young voters now, they don't remember Reformasi in 1999 and 1988. They don't, that's the past. These older leaders, they're looking to solve the problems right here and now for the country. The other two quick points I want to point out is that younger voters get their information very differently than older voters. And I think this is, what's really interesting to watch is how this TikTok campaign, is a WhatsApp campaign and a TikTok campaign. And, Facebook's for older generation, right? Instagram's also for older generation. So this new way of this different type of engagement. And while I agree that there is review of issues, there's still kind of short videos that do trigger into types of emotions. What is difficult to make this election more difficult to predict is because it's a relationship between people and their phone, right? They pull out their phone and and it's a different type of way of engaging. So we're going to see how that evolves in this TikTok election. And I want to speak directly to one of the questions from Akram, who asked about turnout. And I want context, because I think, what happens among young people is that when their friends vote, then they vote, right? It becomes a social experience, right? Now, what we saw in Johor is that voter turnout levels were pretty low when the first time younger voters were allowed to vote, but they were still higher among Undi 18. So it was almost 60%, almost as much as the rest of the others. But it was those in their 20s who didn't vote in high numbers, and their 30s. They were less voter turnout. So remember, young people are different groups. The people in the Undi 18 and then those in the 20s and 30s. My projection is that among these new registered voters, only 22% of them voted. My projection is that will increase, but it will be a lower turnout than we saw in GE14 of 2018 overall, because there's so many more people in the electoral roll. There's more people disengaged, and also the campaigns yet haven't really created that spirit, that semangat, the feeling that let's get out there yet. And it's 3 weeks from election day, from tomorrow, right? And there isn't that kind of connectivity yet. So because I do feel that does matter. But young people will vote in as high as numbers as other groups. So the question now is to give them the financial support and the social network support to be able to make sure they can get back. In particular, I do worry about Sabah Sarawakian voters because many of them are outside and they have high costs to going home in that context. And I think that there are something programs out there to help support them, but I think that their turnout in particular, even within the context of Sarawak, right? To get back to Muka is from Kuching is not an easy task in
Right.
terms of the dynamic. So
Definitely.
turnout numbers will be as high as everyone else, but they won't be as high as they might be given the circumstances.
Right, fantastic. And thank you so much, Akram, for being here as well. Akram himself is an amazing person and, I think is doing a lot of background work to increase some level of engagement in community towards getting higher youth voter turnout as well. Any comments from either of you about Akram's question and also Cameron's question? Cameron's one is specific to Eslin. So maybe Eslin, over to you. The question is, what do you think, what she thought about the youth and how they'll respond to the state elections that are bound to happen next year, considering how close they are to the upcoming general elections? Over to you, Eslin.
I think that what we've seen is that a lot of us, even though we're first-time voters, are experiencing political fatigue, in which we haven't even voted before, but we're already tired and exhausted of the constant bombardment of political agendas and information going on. And so a lot of people, even including some of my peers, are like, I don't think I want to vote because I'm just so tired of this whole government stuff. Which I don't think is the right way to look at it, but it's a sentiment that is shared by a lot of young people. So I think in response to the state elections that are due next year, I think it could go two ways. One is that if people are tired from this current campaigning in the election, they may not turn out to vote for that one because for the state elections, because they may feel, I've already voted, I've already gone through this whole process, I've looked at the campaigning, I've decided who I want to vote for, why should I do it all again? The second outcome would be that if they don't get the outcome that they want in this general election, they will have that semangat, that spirit to vote in the state elections because they're not happy with the decision that came from the general elections. So I think it could go either way. I
Pihan, is there anything that you'd like to say about that?
I think I agree with both Dr. Bridget and Sin as well. Like, it really remains to be seen. I'm not too sure how the outcome of the state elections will be affected by the main elections. But again, it really depends on the the political campaigning message by both parties. And honestly, I remember like last time for the Johor state elections, if not mistaken, Johor and Malacca, like all the opposition parties, they only played around one main political message, which was that to eradicate corruption. So for the voters, if they like more inclined to vote for opposition, for them they feel like it's quite confusing, like who should they vote for? There are so many opposition parties and all of them have about the same message. So for them, like when they look at the polls and all that, then they just decide like, I might as well just stay at home because I'm not going to vote for the government. But if I want to vote for the opposition, who should I vote for? Because everybody is pretty much about the same. So I was hoping that maybe for these upcoming elections and the state elections as well, maybe the parties can highlight a lot more on their manifesto, their vision, the candidates that they put forward, and not just so much on also their their political messaging, but also like highlight who are they sending to become the leader for Malaysia and for the respective states. Yeah.
Agreed. Like some clarity around all of their visions and how they're going to be able to execute it, who are the people that they're going to be working with to make that happen, and literally putting the exact same template so that everybody can make a informed choice as they look at it in a clear format, rather than having to go by what they're hearing on social media first or second or third, whatever, because there are also biases that comes with primacy. So what is the first thing that you hear that can really affect you more than the second or third thing, and also the last thing that you hear can have more impact as well. Totally agree with what you're saying, Peng Han. All right, I just want to take a psychological perspective on change, if that's okay, and leadership. So, if leaders in the political landscape are having to worry about voting, how do they concentrate on their jobs? How do they concentrate on actually doing what it is that they're meant to be doing, while also being worried at the same time about the security of their potential position? And what have your experiences about this been? Does caring about what is going to happen to you as a leader from the outcome of voting, does that impact the quality of the leadership and the real purpose of being a leader? This is a lot of effort, like to come on TikTok and social media, and like, where's the time for real work? And obviously when you read comments, that affects you emotionally and stuff like that. So maybe Peng Han, since you're very close on the ground, or you have at least had that experience, what do you think about your experiences of political leaders, and whether the outcome of voting actually gets them away their time, energy, and effort from actually just focusing on building the nation, which is their primary job?
Yeah, that's a great question. But really, politics is like this, right? It's like you want to do your job, you want to perform to the best of your ability, but then you also have to take into account like what the sentiment of the rakyat is on you. So as a politician, yeah, definitely you cannot like choose to like do my job perfectly, but then neglect the other aspect, which is like your own political image and how the rakyat perceives you. But in terms of the burden, I think like for example, I work with YB Kari Jamaluddin, and he does have um, a very diverse team. His team is quite huge. There's one team for Ministry of Health, and then there's another team for his local area where he is the candidate for the area. So yes, you must definitely dedicate your resources and your energy to both aspects. Usually, he only dedicates it to the health ministry's work. But then when elections are coming along, also like yeah, you have to pay attention to that. And I noticed like one thing that he does is like, for example, if he represents Rembau, the district Rembau, then like certain health ministries initiatives or opening of new hospitals, they can be done in Rembau as well. So that kind of like kills two birds with one stone, because on one hand you are improving the healthcare system for rakyat Malaysia, and on the other hand you also like can showcase your visibility in your particular area by conducting those initiatives.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Just to let everybody know that Psych.OPsych has no political affiliations at all, and this is not a promotion. Over to you, just putting it out there, yeah.
I'll keep it brief, but personally, to me, I think politics is a very theatrical thing. I think, as Peng Han mentioned, it's very there's a lot of showing and telling that's going on, because you have to keep the people engaged with what you want to do. Because otherwise, it's just a bunch of policies on paper, right? People can't relate to it, people can't understand it. So you want to make sure that there's engagement between yourself as a politician and also the people who are supporting you and the people that you are serving. I can't say much from a psychological perspective on the toll it takes on them. I'm sure it gets exhausting to be Syed Sadiq and to be posting TikToks every single day and also doing the work that he does for his constituency. But I think that it is necessary for us to have that transparency. And I think social media has really allowed a deeper level of connection between our representatives and us, because we get to relate to them on a much more personal level than before, because we get to see the updates of them. Personally, I always see when my MPs, like when they go to Parliament and they take Instagram stories, and you feel like you're there as well. You're not just watching the session on TV, and it makes it a lot more relatable. And I think that plays into the emotional aspect as well that Dr. Bridget mentioned, where political affiliations can mostly come from that sense of emotion and how tied you are to your MPs. So I think definitely it plays a role in it. And yeah.
I really love what you're saying, because it seems like maybe it's not a separate thing. Maybe doing your job and educating everybody about what you're doing could be the exact same thing, and it could flow quite naturally. And potentially, as you're telling the story, you might also become clearer about what you're actually doing. And the feedback, if you take it properly, might give you a bit of a heads up about how you can work a bit smarter around certain situations that you're working with. Also, it could be about you immediately getting opinions from other people based on questions that you have in your leadership as well. So I really like what you said. Maybe it's not, both things are important, but maybe it's not separate. Maybe it can be absolutely connected and feel like an absolute flow as well. And through that, maybe you feel like that's a really authentic leader.
And if I
Um,
may add, sorry.
of
So
course.
yeah, totally agree with what both Aislinn and Hetao said just now. I think like great leaders, like they have great visions, but these visions must be sold. So you can't just expect like your vision to be accepted by everyone. So I think that's why it's very important for a politician or a leader to just like build a rapport with the people that he serves, and then also kind of sell that vision to these people so that they can understand and like kind of have rationalize the vision that he is trying to sell. Like if you want to pass policies in parliament, also you have to talk to member from the opposite side of the Dewan Rakyat, and also like even your own Malaysian citizens, they have to understand like what is going on here. And just have that
Agreed.
open
Agreed.
conversation. Yep.
Agreed. And Dr. Bridget, any comments on that?
Just a few comments. I think that it is important as we look at younger leaders. One of the things that they have is less baggage, less personality problems of being able to work with others. And I think that is a really important area because Malaysia is a very diverse country. You need to make compromises on to get things done. And I think this is where younger leaders offer a different perspective about the way they think about the country, by the way they think about different communities in the country in that particular area. Leadership is not just about an individual. It's about the team and the collaboration of the team and managing the team. And I think that is an important dynamic of what we see evolving. Malaysia is going through a political transition. It's not an easy transition. Let me be very blunt. This election will not solve Malaysia's problems. In fact, it will maybe create more problems, but that's another story for another time. But what I do see is a fact that there are concerns. Like my view is, with respect, you don't put hospitals in your constituency. You put hospitals where they're most needed. In that context, you put in that particular area, and there needs to be more checks on these issues. One of the concerns that many Malaysians have is that people are focusing on themselves and the money that they're making from politics, as opposed from serving the people. And I think this election is a really very important opportunity to kind of hold all politicians across the political spectrum to the fire and say, hey, we want more. We want you to do more. We want you to think more. And we want you to start focusing less on yourselves and more on the problems that people are having. Show your real leadership. And I think this is the challenge because unfortunately, Malaysia across spectrums are not getting the quality of leaders that they deserve. Now, Malaysia's not alone. The world is like this, right? So, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take your voice and silence it if you don't get it right away. It's in the lessons in lives is you have to keep trying, right? That's I keep telling when I speak to my students and in our own lives, right? We sometimes it doesn't happen the first time. We have to try again in that context, and we have to keep trying on the things that we think are important. And so this election is part of a process of profound transformation for Malaysians. When I listen to my colleagues here on this panel, democracy is not just an election day. It's also what you're doing in the work that you're doing. So, Malaysia is, I've been blessed to first come here in 1980, so a very long time ago. There's so much confidence transformation that is taking place. This election is a tremendous opportunity, but it is also, we have to be realistic about what will happen. It's a very messy process.
Right. Going to what Essen had said earlier about what voting fatigue, is that what you mentioned earlier, Essen?
Political fatigue, I think.
Political fatigue, right. And when we talk about political fatigue, what also comes to mind is the fatigue that comes with the change of leaders and regular change of leaders as well. There has been, as what Dr. Bridget had said earlier, there's been a lot of change that's gone on, and is that too much? When we think about politics, actually beyond all of that, it's our country, right? I'm not Malaysian, I'm Singaporean, but I've been here for a very long time. At the end of the day, it's about the country, and a country potentially needs both stability and change. What is this doing to you as a youth, or you as someone who's been living in Malaysia, when you experience all of this constant changes that have been going on. Do you even know who the leaders are anymore? Can you remember their names? And do you feel that level of stability that's required? Because from stability, obviously, it gives us a very strong platform to be able to have bravery, right? To be able to do bigger, bolder things. But if that foundation constantly changes, there's a huge impact. There's always, whenever one leader comes into the next, there's always different goals, there's different teams. There's so much of resources are potentially thrown off and wasted. Over to anyone who'd like to start first.
I'll make a quick comment now. Stability is a Singapore narrative. Okay. Context. Then let it to the others.
Right, potential bias over here. Aslan, over to you.
I'd like to think about it for a second, if that's okay. Maybe if someone else could answer first.
Ping Han, over to you.
Okay, so stability is a Singaporean context. Okay.
Do we want security at some point do we need that security in order to actually have a strong foundation for us to build and grow and thrive? So what are your thoughts on change versus stability in our leadership?
Okay. Stability. As of right now, really for the past few decades, I think Malaysia has been ruled by only one political party, and only very recently there's been a change in who's that? The party of governance. So maybe that's why right now we're talking about like lack of stability. Because all of a sudden, like even the opposition also like they suddenly had to learn and to adapt how to properly run this country. Something that I don't think most of them haven't done before, especially those that were elected to be ministers. They didn't have prior experience being a minister or maybe deputy. So how does it change affect the country?
As a youth, you've gone through a couple of changes in the past few years in your political leaders. How have you felt about that? And do you prefer to have stability? How do we balance the both?
I see. Okay, so I think it's very exciting, and this is like the nature of democracy, right? You never know, like if both parties are really good and both parties really have like that semangat and that spirit to really want to change Malaysia and be the governing party for Malaysia, then definitely I wouldn't say it's instability, but it's very exciting to see who will be the next one in power.
Fantastic. That's a great choice of word and also a great way of looking at it. It also sounds like you're saying, may the best man, woman win. Let's put everybody to the test and let's have the best one for us, whether that means change or whether that means stability. Right. Beautiful. Go ahead, Dr. Bridget.
Just a couple quick things. First of all, I think it is important that political institutions are strong, so that when there are changes of leaderships, that the processes and the checks and the balances operate. And I think this is one of the key elements. Malaysia has had unprecedented political change, but things didn't collapse. Things may not have reached the actualization of what it could be, but at the same juncture, Malaysians survived, and many of them continue to thrive, even though it's been a very difficult period of time. So I think that it is important to recognize that leadership changes are part of a process of a transformation. And here, I think Indonesia provides a very interesting lesson for Southeast Asia, for Malaysia, in that, after the democratic transition that took place in 1999, it took a period of time for things to become more stable, for new actors to find new places and foundation. I think that, I don't see these processes as something to be very quick in historically. And I think that, and they're not a linear process. So I think this is an ongoing dynamic in the context of what is happening in Malaysia. And I also feel that, we have a situation now where, there may be fatigue, but at the same juncture, without political pressure, there aren't going to be the changes that are necessary. And this is true of all the political parties. You need a strong opposition and you need strong governing parties for the country, for any country to operate in this area. and another key question in this conversation is, where's the source of instability coming from? What's driving instability? Why are power bases changing? And part of that has to do with the institutions and the lack of accountability that exists within certain aspects of the system. So I think, this is a period of very conflicting trends in Malaysian history. And I think that it's not a simple answer of one or the other.
Yes, totally agree, and really love what our viewer has said as well. Sorry, I can't see your name right now, but regarding stability, it really depends what Malaysians really want. If they think they have made the basic progress, like built the pillars of civil society, such as access to quality healthcare, education, infrastructure, then perhaps stability would be the solution to keep it up and running. And if this is perceived as not achieved and people are not satisfied, then change is necessary as well. Well said. Nice. You should be a writer. Aspen, did you want to have any comments to that? And then I've got one.
Yeah, I just like to add to what the comment says actually, because I was thinking about it, and I think that especially with what Undiateen has done, it's been necessary for the instability to come for the major change to happen. I think when we had the Lawan protests, when we've had major, I wouldn't say uprisings, but major people being unhappy with the state of things, that's when you see major change happen. That's when people get out of their seats and actually step up and do something about it. And I think that if we were completely stable and everything was going well, just like the comment says, then things would just be maintained. The status quo would continue going on. I do think that political instability does make things a little bit difficult. Like, when you have constantly ministers changing and their agendas keep changing, you do have conflicting interests, and you do have things that don't go smoothly, especially for many institutions, for schools, things like that. But I do think that to some degree, some level of instability is needed for change to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Crisis is definitely the birthplace of all opportunity as well. And that crisis typically compounds from lots of monumental or compounding aspects of unhappiness and dissatisfaction as well. So definitely, it's like Mother Nature, right? Like how the sun gives into the moon, stability gives into crisis at some point in time as well, and vice versa. I wanted to flip this to organizationals from an organizational perspective. As we vote for our leaders to take charge of the nation, should we also have employees in the future who are voting for their leaders? Should that be a top-down election of the CEOs in organizations? What are your thoughts on that?
Depends on the company.
I think this is very interesting, because oftentimes the leaders are the people who started the organization, right? And it would be difficult to have an election and change that, because then the entire vision of the company might change. As Dr. Bridget just said, it depends on the company. So it depends on the company's original vision, whether the new leaders would step up to that vision, whether you would want the entire organizational structure to change. Just like how you run a country, there would be conflicts of interest, and it would be a very complicated process, I feel. So I'm not sure whether I would agree to having elections in that way, but I do think that that elections represent democracy, right? And I think that having democracy in an organization is important. So people should have a say, but I'm not sure if an election per se is the best way to go about it. Yeah.
Right.
If I may add,
Yeah, of course, please. Yeah.
I think elections aren't always the only solution to choosing a capable leader, especially, and like again, like what Dr. Bridget said, it depends on the company. There are like many stakeholders to satisfy, like board of directors, your employees, your customers. But I think one good process, like if you want to involve the employees in the like top management or something, then we can a good practice to have would be to conduct like town hall sessions, regular town hall sessions with the employees, so that now we can listen to what they have to say, so that it's kind of democratic, but the actual selection process of the leader would be different, as long as the company is functions optimally. Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
Got it. Yeah. Wonderful. And Dr. Bridget, so for you, it depends on the organization.
I think what I say earlier about political institutions, every organization needs to have accountability mechanisms within them. right? And I think that everyone has a different type of structure, and this is for countries as well. I mean, elections are about accountability and about allowing the voices for people who have often ignored to be heard. And I think, but the companies may have other accountable mechanisms. And I think, what's happened to Malaysia is accountability mechanisms have increased not just in elections, but all across the board in many different areas. But there's still considerable space for improvement of that, especially in some key sectors such as those involving corruption.
I love what you said about accountability mechanism. I just want to flip the opportunity to each one of you to ask any questions at all. So anyone have any questions for me or anyone else in the panel? Penghan, any questions or any last comments that you have?
Questions for now, not that many questions, but last comments. Thank you for inviting us to have this conversation on UNDI 18, and we do have a few experts, one from representative from UNDI 18, a doctor from regarding political studies, as well as you yourself, CEO of the OSIDE, the HR organization. So it's been a pleasure talking to all of you, and I learned a lot today. So yeah.
Likewise. Aslan, anything from you?
I don't have any questions, but I think it was a really good discussion. Thank you so much for having us. I think discussions like this are so important. When you talk about democracy and when you talk about voter education, I think having the space for people to question and to really think about why we're voting and why we should be invested in choosing our leaders is so important. So thank you for having us. Thank you to Penghan and Dr. Bridget as well.
Yeah, Dr. Bridget, any questions or comments from you?
Thank you very much for the honor for being able to speak. And I tell everyone when I'm on the ground talking to voters, whoever it is, doesn't matter, vote. It's your right. Please use it.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much again for being here today. It's really been, although the short timeline that we had to get you guys on board, thank you so much for investing that time. I've learned loads. I've just loved, especially. So maybe we could go around one round. If you could share what struck you the most. Yeah. So for me, what struck me the most was how each of you were able to take a dichotomous, challenge of, like, say for example, change versus stability, but actually recognize that the duality was very important for progress. Whether it's youth versus the older folks, the duality is important for progress. You guys really brought philosophy into the game because everything is about duality. There is always going to be loads of different versions of it, and I love how you've brought the duality into some level of unification and progress into the conversation. Like, super looking forward to the youth taking over the world. Really, there's so much of energy, so much of thoughtfulness. I really love when Aston said, "I need a moment to think." So much of thoughtfulness over here. Really appreciated that conversation. So, anyone, what struck you the most? What was the most valuable thing that changed your mind today, or helped you have a new way of thinking?
Dr. Bridget, would you like to go first, or?
Please go ahead. Younger voices should be first.
Okay, I think for me, it is my first time being on a panel like this and speaking on behalf of UNDI 18. So I was really glad to be given the opportunity to just discuss what the youth's perspective is, and to be able to compare it with people who have similar thoughts and people who have contrasting thoughts. And what I really liked from today is that we didn't all agree, because I think that that's so important in a democracy. And in any conversation, I think it's important that people disagree, because if everyone agrees, you just have an echo chamber of the same ideas going around and around, and you don't end up learning anything. So I liked that we disagreed, and I liked that we all had different perspectives, and I like that we can all voice our different perspectives without the need for trash talking anybody or throwing snide comments or anything like that. I think it's so important to keep the conversation going and to disagree with one another so that we can hear different opinions and different perspectives.
I love what you said about not having to trash talk. You can have the differing opinion without being difficult and unreasonable in the outcome and the dynamics of that conversation as well. Penghan, what struck you the most? What changed your mind? What was new for you? Yeah.
I particularly like it as well, just like what Aislinn said, that when people we have disagreements, that's how you gain a different perspective on the current understanding that you have. So that being said, also I think like initially we talked about how there was not enough voter education in Malaysia regarding elections and democratic processes. So I feel like what we're doing here today, it kind of plays a role in that, right? And also one last thing is like about democracy and its processes for all its pros. Like getting to choose which leader is the best and all that. One of the last question was like, how does it apply in the organization, in the company? Like, can we use the same process to elect our leaders in the company? And I feel like that's why like democracy for all its pros, it cannot be applied to every scenario. So I feel like there's something new that I learned today. But there are of course other processes to go about it to ensure that there is something that it is kind of like democratic as well. So
Right, accountability mechanism.
yeah, true.
All right, so, very nicely said, Dr. Bridget. What struck you
Just
the
quick-
most?
Just
Yes.
quickly, I was
Of course.
just lamenting a bit that I wish that many of Malaysians' politicians would hear the voices of young people in panels like this, hear the love that they have for the country, the thoughtfulness that they offer to different perspectives, the passion that they have for a better Malaysia. And I think I was struck by that, and I am very impressed by, as I continue to be, by young people in this country, and that was a big reminder and a reinforcement of what I've been seeing.
Agreed. I'm getting goosebumps as you're saying that because there's so much of agreement over there. And yeah, hope definitely that one day, Peng Han or Eslin, that we see you right at the top and you're leading the nation as well. And I'll be sure to like pull this out and say like I had a chat with them. Again, first, Bridget Welsh, thank you so much for being here. Aslin Noel from Undi 18 and Peng Han, former Perdana Fellow to the Ministry of Health. My name is Hito and I'm CEO of OPsych, bringing lots of conversations about what psychs us up these days and the psychology around it as well. Happy voting. Please make sure that you go out there and do something about it. You're only allowed to complain if you actually act on things. So thank you so much again. Happy Friday, everyone. Lovely weekend for all of you. See ya.
Selamat
Thank
berundi.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.